Thank you so much. Boy, it's been a joy to hear the Robertsons and the way they lead the music for us, get our hearts ready to hear His Word. Philippians chapter 4. We've looked at this verse already. Our theme is contented with God. Been talking about that for the last 4 sermons. And I want you to just understand, just give you a little simple way of remembering what that means. So let's read the verse. Philippians 4, chapter 4 and verse 11. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned, in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be, say it together, content. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed, both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. The word content has 2 syllables. Con, C-O-N, means with. Tent, to dwell or live. So consequently, content, to dwell or live with God. Contented with God. The whole idea is this. The secret to the Christian life is always focusing on the fact that I'm living in the presence of God. It's as if God were in my tent, because He is in this tent right now, my body. And that simply means that because I'm living in His presence, nothing can harm me that He hasn't designed. Nothing can hurt me. Nothing can derail me that He has not designed or allowed. So many times we get the idea that if we're serving God, everything's going to be great. All you have to do is be saved for a couple of days. You find out that's not true. Amen? Because it's not always great. So many times it's very difficult. And the more we kind of come up with, Lord, how am I going to get through this problem? Remember the 4 stabilizing truths. Now, we've talked about them how many times? Now, there's nobody here but us, so we can just talk, okay? What's the first one? God's love for me is unchanging. Whatever I'm going through, I'm going through. That's God's plan. That's God's promise. So His love for me is unchanging. He doesn't love me less because of what I'm going through. Secondly, God's purpose for me is Christ-likeness. Amen? Thirdly, God's word to me is the final right answer. And last, God's grace is always sufficient. And so consequently, when I'm overcome with uncertainty, I'm tempted to be discontented. We've already said if I'm not contented, then I'm usually contentious. Right? I'm usually contentious. I did my doctoral dissertation on fundamental pastor burnout. What causes people to go to college, seminary, study for the ministry. I mentioned that to the guys this morning. Get in the ministry and finally reach the point that they say, that's it. I'm done. I'm through. And quit. What are some of the factors? When I started the dissertation, the first chapter has to be about the research of all the books that are written on all the topic, so I did all that. And you have to mail every chapter in individually, so I mailed that one in, that was fine. Then the second chapter, where you actually get into your dissertation, I told a make-believe story about a fellow and his wife. His name was Jim Burns. Good name for a burnout guy, you know. And so I told a make-believe story for about a couple of pages, and I sent that chapter in. The chairman of my dissertation committee from Bob Jones called me and he said, we've got a couple of questions that always just, you know, it starts right here in your solar plexus. When they say, we have a couple of questions, and you're going, oh. He said, our first question is this a make-believe story? And I said, well, no, sir. He said, we didn't think it was. Secondly, he said, our question is this your story? And I said, yes, it is. He said, the third question we have is, how in the world are you still in the ministry? I said, it's the grace of God. Because there were many times I did not want to be in the ministry. There were times, I remember one time I called this very successful pastor and I said, listen, I'm just wondering if you might be able to consider recommending me to a church. Now, why would I say that? There's nobody here but us now. Why would I say that? Because I've become discontented with the church that God's given me. And so I talked to him and I said, would that be a possibility? He said, well, brother, he said, I just kind of made up my mind that I would never leave a church unless, first of all, the finances were in great shape. I said, ooh. And then I decided I would never leave a church if the leadership of the church wasn't in good shape so that the next pastor could come in and he would have a good ministry. And I went, ugh. And he said, thirdly, I've decided I'd never leave a church if there were problems in the church that I needed to handle before I left. I said, you know, if all those things are true, you don't want to leave. He said, exactly. Now, wasn't he a blessing? Right? But you see, when it comes to the aspect of being content in whatsoever state I am, we pastors understand a lot about discontentment. And so as a result of that, we can become contentious because of our discontentment. In our troubled days, we cry out to God, and it seems like many times nothing happens, nothing changes. The same people stay in the church. Hello? What did we talk about last night? We said that no man is my enemy, right? Took me a long time in the ministry to ever figure that out. No man is my enemy. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. That's a man. But we wrestle against Satan. He is the enemy. And finally, when we reach the point we understand that there's no person that is the enemy, Satan is the enemy, it just changes my entire attitude. I begin to become contented with where I am because God has placed me there to be a help to those people. Because we said hurting people hurt people. And so consequently, we need to take their hurt into our hearts and learn how can I be a blessing to them. All this is review. So what does this mean? This means that when I'm praying about something, sometimes God doesn't answer prayer. And I pray, nothing. I pray, nothing. I pray, nothing. I'll never forget when I heard this statement, and I was going through some really tough times, and this was the statement. If God is not doing something for you, then he is doing something in you that he might do something great through you. If God's not answering your prayer, if he's not doing something for you, then he is doing something in you. Why? That he might do something great through you. And we talked about Joseph this morning, 13 years of waiting. God was not doing something for him. Why? Because God was doing something in him. 13 years for David. Why? Because God was doing something in him, that he might do something great through him. And so consequently, I can learn to be content in whatever state I am, because if God is not doing something, that doesn't mean God has left me. That simply means it's not time. No good thing will God withhold from them who walk uprightly. So consequently, whatever God has for you, he's not going to withhold it from you if it's good and you're walking uprightly. But so many times we get frustrated with God's time. And so consequently, read it again. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Now the word content means enough to be satisfied. enough to be satisfied, therewith to be content. So as I'm learning, Lord, whatever you give me, whatever my provision is, it is enough for me to be satisfied. Notice verse 12. Maybe you can identify with this. He says, I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I'm instructed, be full and be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. Maybe you've known luxury. Maybe you've known things that have been going well. Maybe you know what it's like to just kind of abound, so to speak. And then all of a sudden, whoosh, you lost it. Or maybe you've had position. Maybe you've been the vice president of a national organization, and all of a sudden you have no position. That's what the Apostle Paul's talking about. He says, I know how to abound. Now, all of us do really well in abounding. Amen? How many of you are good abounders? May I see your hands? The rest of you are too tired to raise your hands, aren't you? All right? We can abound really well. Things are going great. Praise God. God's good all the time, all the time. God is good. Yeah, you said it all the time. But when things go badly, God's still good. All the time. And so consequently, he is simply saying, even when you are abased, the Apostle Paul says, I have learned. So it simply tells me this is not something that just kind of comes naturally. It's not something that you stick under your pillow and you wake up the next morning with that lesson learned. It's something that takes hard work. I remember my brother and I heard sometime, we were roommates in college, and we heard that you could actually be listening to a foreign language and learn a foreign language while you were sleeping. So we thought, hey, that's a good deal. So we found some Spanish records that would teach you how to speak Spanish. So we put y'all know what records are? No? So we put this stack of Spanish records on, and we set the clocks at 2 o'clock in the morning. The record player would go on, and the first record would come down. So we're sacked out. 2 o'clock in the morning, that record player goes on, the record comes down, the needle comes over, and all of a sudden, Buenos dias! We forgot to adjust the volume, But we learned very quickly, you can't learn Spanish just by hearing it while you sleep. Why? It's hard work. Amen? The same thing is true about learning God. It's just not something you put your Bible under your pillow and go, okay, I'll have it tomorrow morning. The Apostle Paul says, I have learned. Now this simply means I am being instructed. So God is placing each one of us back in school. You may say, oh, great. I remember when I got my doctorate, Ruth looked at me and she said, honey, are you done? we had gone through all kinds of classes. We'd go on family vacation, and the boys would be out there in the ocean water just enjoying themselves. I'm sitting in a chair, and I've got a stack of books that high from the sand up. I'm sitting there, and I've got to take exams on all the class notes I ever took and all of the books I ever studied, and to pass this proficiency exam for my counseling degree. And finally, when I got the doctorate, she said, "Are you done?" I said, "I'm done. You can go back and you can start school now, but I'm done." But you know what? We're never done in God's school. Amen? See, God always has something that he's wanting to teach me. Now, here is the greatest lesson you will learn. All of life is simply learning to deal with limitations. All of life is simply learning to deal with limitations. The Apostle Paul is talking about limitations. And he said, when I have no limitations, great, I've learned how to do that. But he said, I've also learned how to be abased. Now, your limitations will be different than my limitations, but all of us have limitations. And we can take the rest of the hour tonight, and we can just talk about what is yours, what is yours, what is yours, what is yours. All of us have limitations. And all of life is simply learning, how do I deal with those limitations? Some are physical, some are mental, some are social, whatever they are. But God is simply saying, I've put you in school, and I want you to learn this lesson. So turn over to 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy talks about this in verse 6 of chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 6. He says, but godliness with contentment is what? It's great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. So life is not all about the size of my possessions. It's not all about the size of my positions. Life is all about the size of my desires. My desires. And if I don't have great possessions, and if I don't have great positions, if my desire is under Holy Spirit control, then I can be content with wherever I am. I was a senior pastor for 38 years. I preached 3 times a week. And then when I left Pillsbury, I sent out resumes. I thought God would be gracious and send me back south. You know, where nobody knew what that white stuff was, right? You know? And I started getting letters from churches, and they said, you know, great education, great family, great ministry, but you're just really not what we're looking for. Wow. I'd never got a letter like that in my life. And I got 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and I going, wow. Finally, I got a letter that said, great family, great education, great ministry, but we're looking for somebody in their middle 40s. Oh. I was 62. Now, they probably thought I would retire at 65. I'll be 71 this coming Tuesday. I'm not about to retire. But they didn't know that. And so consequently, it didn't look like I would ever be a senior pastor again. Now, I wasn't dead, okay? I just wanted to keep on ministering, serving in some way. So I called Pastor Sam, and I said, Pastor Sam, if you ever have a position on your church staff, I'd like to be considered. And he said, let's talk. So for the last 8 years, I have not been the senior pastor. I haven't been in charge of the ministry. I haven't been the one that casts the vision. I haven't been the one that takes the leadership. But you know what? I'm content to be an associate pastor. Why? Because that's where God wants me to be. Does that make sense to you? See, God is the God of change. And so sometimes when God changes your direction and you come to a curve in the road, God many times will say, okay, you were good with this. Are you good with this? Are you with me? And God is a God of change, and many times He's waiting to see how I'm going to respond to change. And if I simply respond by saying, Lord, if that's what you have in mind, that's fine. And I'm honestly sincere. If God is the God of change, then He gets you ready for it. And so it's not about my size of my position, but it's the size of my desires. I just want to serve the Lord. I'll never forget, several months ago, had a fellow in our church that called me. He's shut in. He can't get around. He's got myositis, can't hardly walk. And he heard me preach. And he said, you made a statement that really frustrated me. I said, well, that's normal. I said, which statement was it, you know? And he said, this business about if you're not contented, you become contentious. I said, well, what's wrong with that statement? He said, I don't like that statement. I said, are you becoming contentious? And he said, no. But he said, let me tell you what happened. He said, my mother's lawyer called me this last week. And I had put her in a nursing home just for 10 days because she needed help, and my mom got mad. And she called my sister in, and she said, that's it. He's not going to be in charge of my accounts anymore. He's not going to be power of attorney anymore. And she said, I'm taking him out of the will. And he said, I got a phone call. No longer am I a part of Mama's will, and now my sister is totally in charge of it. And he said, we're not talking about little dinky amounts. We're talking about a massive amount of money. And he said, all of a sudden, she's in charge of it, and she doesn't like me. So he said, how am I supposed to respond? I said, I don't know. What does the Bible say? Right? What does the Bible say? I have learned in whatsoever state, condition, circumstance I am, therewith to be. And he said, I don't like that verse. I pulled out my knife and I handed it to him. I said, cut it out of your Bible. He said, preacher, we don't cut verses out of the Bible. I said, you just did. I said, when we don't like a verse, we make up our mind we're not going to obey that verse. We might as well cut it out of the Bible. But if it's in the Bible, God's going to hold you accountable for it. So I said, the question is, are you content? And he said, I've been working on that. And he said, I've been praying about that. And I'm here to say, I'm okay. I'm content. Now, let me quickly tell you what God wants to do in our lives. He wants to take the fight out of my system. We, by nature, are people that want to manipulate. We want to control. We want to be in charge. You remember Jacob and Esau? How'd they get along? Right? Remember what Esau said? He said, when Dad dies, you're dead meat. You're gone. I'll take care of you. So Jacob takes off. He's gone for 20 years. He comes back. In Genesis chapter 32, God meets him the night before he's going to meet his brother who's coming out to meet him. God meets him. And Jacob has found out that his brother Esau is coming out with 400 welcoming committee members. Yeah. And so Jacob is sending gifts on ahead, hey, brother, glad to be coming home, but God had to break him. And so Genesis chapter 32 talks about God wrestling with Jacob all night long. See, Jacob's name means trickster or conniver. So many times we just manipulate, we want to be in charge, we want to be in control, and God says you need to become broken. I can't bless you until you become broken. Go back and read that passage, because when he finally gave in, he said, Lord, he said, okay, I've had enough. And by the way, it didn't take much. All God did was just touch the hollow of his thigh, and all of a sudden he's walking like this. Now he's ready for a battle the next day, walking like this, See, isn't it interesting how God can get our attention? And so he says, so Jacob, you've been conniving all your life. How's that working for you? And Jacob says, I can't hardly walk. And he says, oh, bless your heart. And he says, I'm not going to let you go, Lord, until you bless me. Now here's the story. Here's the key. When he became discontented with his discontentedness, when he finally submitted himself to God, he said, Lord, whatever. God said, I'm going to give you a new name. And the new name means God commands. Israel, God commands. And he said, you're going to have victory with God and with men. Who's he meeting the next day? A man with 400 men coming to beat up on him. But he gives him a promise. He said, I'm going to give you victory. So what happens? The Bible tells us in chapter 33, he meets him the next day, and something has happened now in Esau's heart. Now, who could do that? I can't hear you. There's a God in heaven that finally, when I become content with what I have, see, he wanted to be the number one guy. He wanted to have the birthright and the blessing because he wanted 2/3 of Daddy's possessions. Now all of a sudden he doesn't care about Daddy's possessions. Now all of a sudden he says, Esau, you can have it all. And when he becomes contented with what he has, Esau says, I don't need all these things that you're sending me. He said, I have enough. And Jacob made the statement, I want to give it to you because I have enough. What happened? When he became broken, and contented with God and his plan. No longer did he have to connive to be head of the family and in charge. Now he said, can we be brothers? And the fellowship was renewed. You see, I've learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be what? content. Now, God has put you in school. So what kind of grade are you making? Hello? If I were to ask your wife or your husband, are you content with where you are and God's working in your life and God's answers to your prayers? Are you content? What would the person who knows you best tell me? Oh, you'd rather I didn't ask? See, you're in school. And whenever you're in school, you have an assignment. And the next day, don't you hate it? You walk in class, and the teacher says those ugly words. Take out a half sheet of paper. Remember that? Number 1 to 5. And you're going, because you didn't read the assignment. You're not ready. Let me tell you something. Every day in our Christian life, God tells us to take out a half sheet of paper because we are tested in this area of learning to be content with who He is and what He provides. Half sheet of paper. So consequently, if you make a decision tonight, Lord, I need to make some changes. I need to stop complaining and I need to stop griping because grumpy people are not grateful people. I need to stop griping. I need to stop complaining. And God, I need to start looking to you and simply say, I am contented with you, God. Whatever you allow, wherever you place me, however long you want me to be here, I'm good. My hands are up. What is the songwriter said? All to Jesus what? I surrender. I'll never forget the first time I was preaching and we had a deaf ministry in our church and the deaf were off to my right side and we came to that song and all the deaf's hands went and I'm going, but that's the sign for surrender. And I wonder how long it's been since spiritually your hands have gone up. Since you've told the Lord, I'm good where I am. I'm here. I'm okay. I'm good with my wife. I'm good with my husband. I'm good with my parents. God, you've provided me with the job that I have. I'm satisfied. Unless you work out some other way, I'm going to stop complaining and manipulating, trying to be control. I'm going to trust you and be content. Our heads are bowed and our eyes are closed. God is in your tent. He's living right there. He is allowing the circumstances of your life to be what they are. And you've prayed for things to change. But God hasn't answered your prayer. If God is not doing something for you, then what is He doing in you that He might do something great through you? Would you simply tell Him tonight in the quietness of this hour, as Donna plays that song, all to Jesus, I surrender, all to Him. Would you tell Him tonight, Lord, my hands are up. I'm going to stop fighting, stop manipulating, stop being contentious. Tonight, Father, I want you to help me to become contented. And to learn to trust you in every area of my life. Are you telling Him that tonight? This may be one of the most important decisions you have made in a long, long time. And God has you here on purpose. Now we're going to sing that first verse of that song, and then we'll close. Heads are still bowed, eyes are still closed. Sing it together with me. All to Jesus I surrender, all to Him I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him, in His presence daily live. I surrender all. to thee, my blessed Savior, I surrender all. That's our prayer, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.